about survival is the more you know and the better your skills, the less equipment you need. If all of your survival skills rely on having equipment available to you, well, you may not be able to help yourself in a real situation if you don't have that equipment. So I'm going to show you how to build a shelter that requires no equipment whatsoever. This is called a debris hut. A debris hut basically models itself after a squirrel's nest, after a squirrel's dray. Squirrels, they build nests full of dry leaves, many layers thick, and those dry leaves add a lot of insulation value, and that's how squirrels stay warm all winter long. We're kind of going to do the same thing, except instead of being in a tree, we're going to be on the ground. So a debris hut is designed to be a shelter that you don't need any materials from home, maybe a piece of string, that's about it. Other than that, you don't need any materials. It's all using natural materials. And this is a shelter that you'd use in cold weather if you have no way of making a fire. So if you don't have any way of making a fire, no lighter, no matches, no fire steel, it's too wet to get a bow drill going, there's just no way it's going to happen, you can make a debris hut as a way to stay warm even in cold weather just by adding lots and lots and lots of insulation. So this debris hut, it's not going to be a big shelter, it's basically just going to be the size of your body, just so you can stuff yourself into it, crawl into it, and use your own body's heat to be reflected back to you, to be caught, and then your own body's heat, that's what's going to warm up your shelter and keep you warm. So let's start and show you how to do that. So remember, when it comes to survival, one of the rules we abide by is work smarter, not harder. So if you're going to build a debris hut, it's best to do it in an area that has all your natural materials right there available to you. For demonstration purposes, and because I'm going to be using this debris hut on upcoming programs, I'm going to build one right here in our garden instead. So I've brought the materials from the woods over here, and we're going to construct the debris hut here in the garden. But normally, you'd be constructing this somewhere where the materials are right in your area, so you expend less energy to get those materials. The first thing we need for our debris hut is a good, sturdy, long wood pole, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 12 feet long. So I have this big guy right here. It's nice and straight, it's nice and sturdy, it's not going to fall apart or break on me. This is the first step in getting our debris hut up. This is going to act as the ridge line of our shelter. So this is going to be the top line. If you think of a teepee, right? This is going to be that center pole of a teepee going down the ridge line, and we're going to pile sticks on top of this. So if you find a tree with a crook in it, that's about the right height. Instead of tying up a frame, go ahead and put your center pole resting on that tree, just like that. Now this is a good height above the ground, and this is going to be a good height for our shelter. But instead of doing things the easy way, I'll show you how to do it a little tougher. If you don't have a tree, if you don't have a rock, if you don't have anything else to prop that pole on that's already in your environment, you can create something by using a lashing knot and two smaller poles. To make a sturdy framework for our debris hut shelter, we can take two sturdy poles and cross them in an X formation. So we know where to tie these because this is going to be the entrance to our shelter. We're going to crawl in through this part of the doorway right here. So we want to make this just big enough that once there's some insulation on the ground, once there's a pile of insulation, we want to be able to just crawl inside with not that much extra room to spare. So I would say somewhere in the neighborhood of right about there looks good. Next thing you need is some rope or some paracord to tie this together. We're going to use a lashing knot. If you didn't bring anything else with you, you can even use your own shoelace, right? So you don't need much rope for this, but we're just going to tie this framework together in an X shape using our rope and making a lashing knot. Okay, the first step in making our square lashing knot is we have to start out with another type of knot called a clove hitch. How do you make a clove hitch? You take the working end of your rope, you're going to pass it over one of the pieces once, just like that, cross it over itself, like that, making an X, go around the back one more time, give yourself a little extra slack here, and now your working end is going to go underneath the X that you made, just like that, and go ahead and pull everything tight. That's the first step in making a square lashing knot. Once we have our clove hitch in place, the next step in making our square lashing knot is to start doing some lashing turns around both of our poles. So I'm going to take our rope, We're going to pass this around the bottom, over the top of the second piece, around the bottom again, like this, and we're going to keep tension on the rope the whole way. Pulling it nice and tight on each turn. And we want to go around at least 3 times, if not 4 times or more. So let's go around one more time. All right. Now at this stage, we've made our lashing knots. Everything's pulled down tight. Now we're going to start to do some turns that we call frapping turns. So instead of going around the wood, we're going to take our working end and go around the lashes that we just made. Going to double this back. Remember, we're going to pull it tight on every turn. So about 3 times around, about 3 frapping turns should do it. Nice and tight. Just like that. So now to finish this off, we can just do another clove hitch. Or we can do a couple half hitches, it's up to you, to finish this off either way. If you're left with a little extra, that's good, because now we can use this extra to tie our center crosspiece to our framework. Okay, now that our 2 framework poles are lashed together, we're just gonna erect these like that. Remember, try to estimate the size of a door that you're gonna need just for 1 person with some insulation on the ground. Just make sure you're gonna have enough room to crawl in without knocking your shelter down. And then we kind of want to just jam the bottom edges, the bottom parts where it's touching the ground. Try to jam it down into the ground a little bit, so it's not going to shift and move on you as you're building your shelter. Once this is in place, this is when we want to put our center support beam in place. And if we have some extra cordage right here, we're just going to lash the main center beam to our framework however we can. All right, at this point, now we just want to crawl in and check the size of our shelter before doing any more work. If we haven't made this big enough, or if we've made it too big, and then we go and build the rest of the shelter, we're wasting a lot of time and effort. So check the size first. So, shelter should be big enough that you have enough room to put your feet without your feet sticking out above the center ridge line and without your head sticking out the door. As long as that's good, should be good to go. If you need to make any adjustments at this point, now's the time. Now that we've checked the size of our shelter and made sure that it's going to fit, our next step is to put a lot of insulation down on the ground. Remember, a shelter is not just something to protect you from the elements in the sky. You need to protect yourself from the cold ground as well. You can lose just as much heat, if not more, to the cold ground as you can to the wind and to the rain, to other things like that. So we're going to put a nice big fluffy bed of dry pine needles down here. If you don't have pine needles, dry leaves will work just as fine, but you're looking for dry, fluffy material that's going to trap your body heat and insulate you from the ground. Alright, we now have a good bed of dry pine needles down. Now, like I said in the other video, you don't want to skimp out on your ground insulation. You don't want to just scatter around a couple pine needles and call it a good day. You need a good lofty bed. This one here, probably about 8 to 9 inches thick, and you got to remember, once you get down on top of it, once you're laying on top of it, it's going to compress. So you need enough insulation that you're far enough away from that cold ground and you're not going to lose body heat to the ground. So a good thick bed of very dry insulation is a necessity. Alright, the next step in building our debris hut, we're going to lay sticks on top of our top crossbeam right here, kind of like a rib cage. We're going to lay sticks in both directions, so it's going to cover this and form a teepee shape going the whole way down. Alright, the key to putting these sticks on is you don't want to do more work than you have to. So when you pick up a stick, you want to find a place that it fits, and you want it to mirror the angle of the framework that you've set up. So the other thing about this is, if your stick sticks up too far past the top ridge, just break it off, because if the sticks pass too far up and leave your bundle of leaves and insulation that we're about to put on this, rainwater can hit those sticks and travel down the sticks and drip inside your shelter. So you don't want your sticks to extend too far past the top there. But if you break a piece off, just go ahead, move it down to the bottom where it fits. So the purpose of putting this rib system of sticks in is, once it's complete, we're going to pile lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of dry leaves on top. So you want to keep going until there's not enough room in between the sticks for leaves to drop through. It doesn't need to be something that you're not able to see through. That's too many sticks, but just enough sticks that when you drop leaves on top, they won't fall into the inside, they'll stick on the outside. So here we're about halfway done. We definitely need to keep going.
Alright, at this point the structure is pretty much done. I'm going to take you on a quick tour around it so you can see. We want to leave our entrance open so that we can climb in and out. That's going to be our doorway right there. As you can see, the sticks are close enough together that when we start to pile leaves on top, the leaves aren't all just going to fall through, but they're going to get caught right on the ribs right there. So none of our sticks stick up too far past that central rib. If they do stick up too far, we're inviting rain to travel down the sticks through our insulation and possibly get us wet. And if you notice, once you get towards the bottom where your feet are going to go, the angle of our sticks just spreads out a little bit, just to give a little more room for your feet down at the bottom of the shelter.
We're going to keep going like this, putting more and more and more insulation on here. The ultimate goal, we want to put enough dry leaves on the outside that when we reach our arm through to the inside, we can barely just touch the framework, the wooden framework and skeleton of our shelter. That's how much insulation you'll need when it gets really cold in the wintertime. So we're just going to keep piling dry leaves on top of dry leaves on top of dry leaves. Okay, at this point we have our shelter covered with leaves. Now, a lot of people make the mistake and stop here. Even though the shelter is starting to get covered and you don't really see any wood sticking through, this is nowhere near enough insulation. We need to heap a lot more dry leaves on top if we want to stay warm in cold weather. So we're going to keep going until this is a huge mound of leaves, about 2.5 to 3 feet thick, on top of our structure, on top of the framework. All right. So what do we think? Is it good enough? Only one way to check. Put your arm through, see if your arm can go all the way through and just barely touch the structure. You know, that was only about up to my elbow. Still not good enough for a cold night. Still not good enough to keep a rainstorm, a heavy rainstorm off you and keep you dry. So, gotta keep going. At this stage, we are finally done with our insulation. We have about an arm's length of insulation all the way around, and this is gonna be enough to protect us in a rainstorm or if it gets really cold. However, we're still not done. We don't want to leave a doorway open in our shelter because remember, this is not being used with a fire. This is just our own body heat being reflected back to us. So we need even more leaves to pile in front of our doorway here. That way, once we're inside our shelter, we can pull those leaves in and block off any cold wind coming from our doorway.
Okay, here is our debris shelter, all done with the leaves piled in front of the doorway so we can actually get in. So I'm going to take you on a quick around the world tour. Alright, there is our doorway. The only way we can really tell at this point is our cross beam is sticking out, so we're actually going to just dive right in through that pile of leaves and crawl our way in through that pile of leaves to get in. And once we're in, we're going to pull the rest of the leaves on top of ourselves. Alright. Huge pile. It's about 5 feet tall in the center. The pile of leaves is about 5 feet tall in the center. It's about 3 feet deep all the way around. And there we have a proper debris hut. Now the only thing left is to get in and test it out.
Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and crawl in, show you how to do that. And then once I'm inside, I'm going to get cozy and pull those leaves on top of me to seal off the doorway. Then we're going to test out our debris hut. The only way to really truly test it is we're going to hit it with a lot of water and see if I stay dry inside. So if I can stay dry inside, that's how we know we have a lot of insulation. It's going to stand up to a rainstorm and we've built a nice proper debris hut. So here we go. So here I am inside, got plenty of room. It's almost a little too much room. This is a good sized debris hut. I could easily fit 2, maybe 3 people in here. The more people you have, the more body heat you have, and the warmer you're gonna stay. Go to the bucket. Right on top of the shelter. Woo. All right, as you can see, I'm totally dry, no problem. So heavy rain, even literally bucketing down rain, if you put enough insulation on top of the debris hut, you're gonna stay dry, you're gonna stay warm. But hopefully this video showed you just how much work it is to build one of these. If I was just a single person by myself trying to build one of these out in the woods, if I found an area that had the right materials and lots of leaves on the ground and sticks, I would say it would still take me somewhere between 3 and 4 hours to build a proper debris hut, to build one the way it should be built that's going to keep me warm and dry in cold weather or in rain. So This should show you just how important it is to bring a few supplies with you, to bring a couple ways to make fire, maybe even bring a survival blanket or a space blanket, reusable space blanket to make a shelter easier. If I had those things with me, instead of having to build something like this, I could easily build a lean-to with a fire in front of it, or if I even bring a piece of plastic with me, I can build a super shelter and stay nice and toasty warm. So, it's good to know how to build one of these in case you ever need to, in case you're totally out of luck, but it's also a good example of why it's important to bring a few supplies with you when you go hiking or camping, just so you don't have to build one of these, because it takes a lot of effort, burns a lot of calories, and it's a lot of work. All right, so this is our debris hut.